The message came on every screen, every radio, every device capable of receiving a signal. It wasn't static or garbled alien speech, it was perfect English, spoken with the cold precision of a computer reading a death sentence. "People of Earth," the voice announced, "we are the Zephyrians of the Andromeda Collective. We have observed your species for 3 centuries. You wage war over resources, destroy your own planet, and show cruelty to your own kind. You are uncivilized and unworthy of the gift of sapience." The world held its breath as the voice continued. "We offer you one choice: surrender your weapons, submit to our guidance, and perhaps learn civilization from your betters. You have 72 hours. When the transmission ended, massive ships appeared in Earth's skies, gleaming white vessels the size of cities, hovering silently above every major population center. The aliens had made one critical mistake in their assessment of humanity. They thought our capacity for war made us uncivilized. They were about to learn that it made us something far more dangerous, survivors who had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. Colonel Sarah Martinez stood in the Pentagon's Emergency Command Center, watching the feeds from around the globe. The alien ships hung in the air like deadly ornaments, casting shadows over New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, and dozens of other cities. The silence from the ships was almost worse than threats would have been. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Johnson approached with a tablet. "We're getting reports from all major world leaders. The consensus is unanimous." "Let me guess," Sarah said, not taking her eyes off the screens. "They want us to fight." "That's correct, ma'am." President Chin called it humanity's finest hour. Prime Minister Thompson used some words I can't repeat in polite company, but the message was clear. Chancellor Weber was more diplomatic, but she essentially said the same thing. Sarah nodded. She'd been expecting this. Humans had never been good at backing down from a fight, especially when someone told them they weren't good enough. The aliens had just insulted the entire species and demanded surrender. They might as well have kicked a hornet's nest and asked the hornets to apologize. "What's our status on Project Prometheus?" she asked. Johnson's face brightened slightly. "Dr. Reeves says they cracked the final calculations yesterday. The prototype tested successfully at 0800 hours. Good. Because I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get." The next 60 hours passed in a blur of activity. Military bases worldwide hummed with preparations. Nuclear submarines moved into position. Satellite networks were reconfigured. Most importantly, factories that had been secretly converted over the past decade began producing weapons that officially didn't exist. The public didn't know about Project Prometheus. They didn't know that for 20 years, humanity's best scientists had been working on a simple assumption: someday, someone would come from the stars who wouldn't be friendly. The project had consumed trillions of dollars and the careers of thousands of researchers. It had been called everything from humanity's insurance policy to the biggest waste of money in history. Dr. Elena Reeves stood in the underground facility beneath Nevada's desert, watching her life's work finally serve its purpose. The Prometheus device looked deceptively simple: a sleek metal cylinder about the size of a baseball bat, connected to a computer terminal that could have come from any office building. "The theory is sound," she told the assembled military officers. "We've known for decades that if you can manipulate quantum fields at the subatomic level, you can create weapons that ignore conventional defenses. The problem was always power requirements and containment." General Harrison, a weathered man with gray hair and serious eyes, leaned forward. "But you solved it?" "We solved it," Elena confirmed. "The Prometheus warheads don't just explode, they unravel matter at the quantum level. Shields, armor, even the exotic materials these aliens probably use, none of it matters if the weapon attacks the fundamental forces holding atoms together." "How many do we have?" 1,200 functional warheads. Another 3,000 in various stages of completion. Harrison whistled low. 1,200 reality breakers. "Think it'll be enough?" Elena looked at the screen showing the alien ships. "We're about to find out." With 12 hours remaining on the alien ultimatum, humanity made its decision. Every news channel, every radio station, every internet platform carried the same message. It wasn't delivered by a president or prime minister. Instead, it was read by a 7-year-old girl named Anna Chen from San Francisco, chosen because her school essay about what makes humans special had gone viral 3 months earlier. Anna stood at a podium that had been lowered to her height, wearing her favorite dress with flowers on it. Her voice was clear and steady as she read words that had been crafted by humanity's best speechwriters and approved by every world leader. "Dear aliens," she began, "thank you for your message. We heard what you said about us being uncivilized. You said we fight too much and hurt our own planet and each other. You're right about some of that. We do fight, and we do hurt each other sometimes, and we haven't always taken good care of our world." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "But you made a mistake. You thought fighting made us bad. You don't understand that fighting is what kept us alive when the ice came, when the volcanoes exploded, when diseases tried to kill us all. Fighting is what made us build better tools and learn more things and help each other survive." Anna's voice grew stronger. "You said we should learn civilization from you. But here's what we learn from you. You come to someone else's home without asking, you insult them, and then you threaten them if they don't do what you want. Where we come from, that's not civilization. That's called being a bully." The little girl smiled then, the kind of innocent smile that made adults remember why they worked so hard to protect the future. "So here's our answer: no thank you. We don't want your help, and we don't want to surrender. If you want to fight us, that's okay. We've been fighting for 1,000,000 years, and we're really good at it. Maybe it's time you learn what civilization actually looks like." The message ended with Anna waving at the camera and saying, "Bye-bye, alien bullies. Good luck." The response came 6 hours later. The alien ships began to glow with a harsh blue light. Energy beams lanced down from the sky, striking military installations around the world. The Pentagon's war room shook as explosions bloomed across the horizon. Reports flooded in from every continent. Pearl Harbor was burning, NORAD was under attack, the Kremlin's defenses were being systematically destroyed. "They're going for military targets first," Colonel Martinez observed, watching the tactical displays. "They want to break our ability to resist before they start on civilian areas." "Smart," General Harrison admitted. "But they're about to learn that when you declare war on humanity, every human becomes a soldier." The first phase of humanity's response was conventional aircraft, missiles, artillery. Everything humanity had learned about warfare in 100 generations of conflict was thrown at the alien ships. Most of it bounced harmlessly off energy shields that glowed brighter with each impact. But some got through. Direct hit on Ship 7, an operator called out. "Conventional warhead, minimal damage, but we breached their shields for 0.3 seconds. "Noted," Harrison said grimly. "Time to see if Dr. Reeves earned her Nobel Prize." The first Prometheus warhead was fired from a submarine in the Pacific. It looked like an ordinary cruise missile as it arced through the sky toward the massive alien ship hovering over Tokyo. The ship's defenses activated immediately. Energy beams reached out to intercept the incoming threat. The beams struck the missile and passed right through it. "Quantum displacement field is holding," Dr. Reeves reported from her bunker. "The warhead is phasing in and out of normal space-time. Their weapons can't lock onto it." The missile reached the alien ship and detonated. What happened next had never been seen before in the history of warfare. Instead of fire and shrapnel, reality itself seemed to unravel around the point of impact. The alien ship's hull didn't just break, it dissolved as the fundamental forces holding its atoms together were disrupted. A sphere of destruction expanded outward, eating through exotic metals and energy fields alike. When the effect ended 10 seconds later, the massive alien vessel had a hole straight through its center 1/2 a mile wide. The ship fell from the sky like a dying whale, crashing into Tokyo Bay with a splash that sent tsunamis racing toward shore. Across the globe, every human with access to news feed watched the footage in stunned silence. Then the cheering began. "One down," Colonel Martinez said quietly. 17 to go. The aliens' response was swift and brutal. The remaining ships abandoned their precision strikes and began carpet-bombing major cities. Millions died in the first hour as energy beams turned skyscrapers into glass and concrete rain. But humanity's response was equally swift. Prometheus warheads began flying from hidden launch sites around the world. Submarines surfaced in oceans and Arctic waters to fire their deadly cargo. Mobile launchers emerged from forests and mountains where they had waited in concealment for decades. The aliens tried to adapt. Their ships began moving, weaving through the sky in evasive patterns. Some warheads missed. Others were intercepted by swarms of smaller alien craft that had deployed from the main vessels. But enough got through. Ship after ship fell from the sky. Each one took a piece of a city with it, but also eliminated a source of death beams from above. The battle became a race. Could humanity destroy the alien fleet before the aliens destroyed human civilization? Dr. Reeves watched the battle unfold from her underground facility, making constant adjustments to the Prometheus guidance systems. "They're learning," she told her team. "Each ship that goes down gives them more data on our weapons. We need to accelerate the timetable." "How?" asked her chief engineer, Dr. Park. "We use the backup plan. Project Damocles." Park's face went white. "Elena, that was just theoretical. We've never tested it at full scale." "We've never been invaded by aliens before either," she replied grimly. "Sometimes you have to make the theory work." Project Damocles was Prometheus taken to its logical extreme. Instead of individual warheads that unraveled matter in small areas, it was designed to create a cascading quantum field collapse across an entire orbital zone. In simple terms, anything in Earth's upper atmosphere would cease to exist at the atomic level. The problem was that anything included human satellites, space stations, and the International Space Station with its crew of 6 astronauts. The debate took place in secure conference rooms around the world, connected by quantum-encrypted communications that the aliens couldn't intercept. World leaders, generals, and scientists argued over the price of victory. "We're talking about sacrificing 6 people to save 8 billion, President Chen said over the secure line. "It's not even a question mathematically." "It's not about mathematics," replied Dr. Sarah Kim, the ISS mission commander speaking from orbit. "It's about what kind of people we want to be when this is over." Colonel Martinez found herself speaking for all of humanity. "Dr. Kim, what's your crew's position on this?" There was a long pause before Kim responded. "We've discussed it. If activating Damocles will end this war, then you have our permission. But we have one request." "Name it." "Let us go down fighting. Give us control of the orbital defense platforms. We'll take as many of the smaller alien craft with us as we can before you activate the field." The decision was made. As the final Prometheus warheads were being prepared for launch, the crew of the International Space Station took manual control of every orbital weapons platform humanity had secretly placed in space over the past decade. Laser batteries, kinetic bombardment systems, and even some experimental weapons that existed only in classified files all came online under their control. The aliens' smaller ships, fighter craft and troop transports that had been deploying from the main vessels suddenly found themselves under attack from above. The 6 astronauts became humanity's guardian angels, raining destruction down on alien forces with a precision that only came from the high ground of space. "This is ISS Control," Dr. Kim's voice came over all military frequencies. "Hostile fighters at these coordinates, engaging now." Beams of coherent light lanced down from orbit, carving through alien ships like a hot knife through butter. Kinetic projectiles, simple tungsten rods accelerated to incredible speeds, struck with the force of small nuclear weapons, creating flowers of destruction in the upper atmosphere. The alien fleet, already reduced to 8 massive ships, began to retreat. Their vessels climbed higher into the atmosphere, trying to get beyond the range of Earth's weapons. "They're running," General Harrison observed with grim satisfaction. "Hit them with everything we have left." The final barrage of Prometheus warheads launched simultaneously from sites around the globe. 47 weapons, each one capable of unraveling matter at the quantum level, all targeted at the fleeing alien ships. The aliens tried one last desperate gambit. Instead of continuing their retreat, they turned their ships around and dove back toward Earth's surface. If they were going to die, they intended to take as much of humanity with them as possible. "They're going kamikaze," Colonel Martinez realized with horror. "If those ships hit major population centers, Not on our watch, came Dr. Kim's voice from the ISS, activating Damocles in 10 seconds. It's been an honor serving with you all. The quantum field generator that had been built into the ISS activated with a sound like reality tearing apart. The effect began at the space station itself, unraveling the atomic structure of everything in a rapidly expanding sphere. The 6 astronauts had perhaps 2 seconds to see their sacrifice beginning to work before they became part of the quantum dissolution. The field expanded outward at the speed of light, catching the diving alien ships just as they entered the upper atmosphere. One by one, the massive vessels simply ceased to exist as the fundamental forces holding their matter together were disrupted. But the effect didn't stop there. Dr. Reeves watched in horror from her bunker as the quantum field continued to expand beyond its calculated parameters. "It's not stopping," she whispered. "The cascade effect is feeding on itself." The field reached its maximum expansion just as it touched the edge of Earth's magnetosphere. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the entire planet might be consumed by humanity's ultimate weapon. Then, slowly, the effect began to stabilize and collapse back on itself. When it was over, Earth's upper atmosphere was completely clear. No alien ships, no debris, no trace that the invasion had ever reached space. The only evidence of the battle was the wreckage of alien vessels that had crashed on the surface, and the smoking ruins of cities that had been targeted in the opening hours of the war. 3 months after the invasion, Colonel Martinez stood in what had once been the Pentagon's war room. The building was being rebuilt, along with much of Washington, D.C. The reconstruction was going faster than anyone had expected. Humanity had a way of bouncing back from disasters that impressed even themselves. "Final casualty report, ma'am," Lieutenant Johnson said, approaching with a tablet. His uniform was crisp and new. The old one had been vaporized along with half the building during the initial attack. "How bad?" Sarah asked, though she already knew it would be terrible. 47 million dead worldwide. Another 100 million injured. Infrastructure damage in the trillions. Johnson paused. "But ma'am, the birth rate statistics are interesting." "Oh." "There's been a 40% increase in births worldwide since the invasion ended. Demographers are calling it the biggest baby boom in human history." Sarah smiled grimly. Nothing like a near-extinction event to remind people why reproduction is important. But the real surprise came from the alien wreckage itself. Teams of scientists working around the clock to reverse engineer the crashed ships had made discoveries that would change everything. Dr. Elena Reeves, now heading the newly formed Department of Xenotechnology, stood before the rebuilt United Nations General Assembly with news that would reshape humanity's future. "The Zephyrian technology is remarkably advanced," she began, "but in ways we didn't expect. Their ships weren't just weapons platforms, they were entire ecosystems. Self-sustaining biomes capable of supporting life for centuries in deep space." She clicked to the next slide, showing the interior of one of the crashed vessels. Instead of cold metal corridors, the images showed what looked like vast gardens, with trees and flowing water and creatures that seemed to be a hybrid of plant and animal. "More importantly, we've discovered that the Zephyrians weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were refugees." A murmur went through the assembly. This wasn't what anyone had expected. Their home system was destroyed by a cosmic catastrophe approximately 500 years ago. These ships were all that remained of their civilization, floating arcs carrying the last survivors of their species through the galaxy, looking for a new home. President Chen leaned forward in his seat. "Are you saying they attacked us because they were desperate?" "Not exactly," Elena replied. "Our analysis of their data cores suggests they genuinely believed they were offering us a gift. In their culture, submission to a superior civilization was considered an honor. They couldn't comprehend that we would choose death over what they saw as enlightenment. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just defeated an invasion, they had wiped out the last remnants of an entire species that had been trying, in their own misguided way, to save both themselves and humanity from what they perceived as barbarism." The revelation sparked a philosophical crisis that lasted months. Religious leaders debated whether humanity had committed genocide or righteous self-defense. Philosophers argued about the nature of civilization and whether cultural misunderstanding could justify extinction. It was Anna Chen, now 10 years old, who provided the answer that would define humanity's future. Speaking at a children's peace conference in rebuilt Geneva, she asked the question that had been bothering her since she learned about the Zephyrians' true nature. If they were lost and scared and looking for a home, she said, her voice carrying the same clarity that had defied the aliens years earlier, then maybe we can help the other ones who are still out there. The idea was audacious and technically impossible, but it captured the world's imagination. If there were other Zephyrian ships wandering the galaxy, other refugees from their destroyed civilization, perhaps humanity could find them and offer the one thing they truly needed, not subjugation, but sanctuary. Dr. Reeves found herself heading a new project that dwarfed even Prometheus in scope and ambition. Using quantum field technology originally designed for warfare, they would create a beacon, a signal that could reach across interstellar distances, carrying a message of peace and offering safe harbor to any surviving Zephyrians. The quantum field generators can create a standing wave that propagates through subspace, she explained to the project team. Essentially, we're going to turn Earth into a lighthouse that can be seen from anywhere in the galaxy. The technical challenges were immense. The power requirements alone would have bankrupted any single nation, but the project had something that no previous human endeavor had ever possessed: the complete, enthusiastic support of every country on Earth. The Redemption Beacon, as it came to be known, was built in the ruins of what had once been Tokyo Bay. The crashed Zephyrian ship had been carefully excavated and its technology integrated with human quantum field generators to create a hybrid system more powerful than either species could have built alone. 2 years after the invasion, on the anniversary of the first alien ship's destruction, humanity sent its message to the stars. Anna Chen, now 12 and serving as Earth's unofficial spokesperson for interstellar relations, stood before the massive crystalline structure that was the beacon's focal point. Her words were translated into every human language and encoded into quantum frequencies that would carry across the cosmos. To any Zephyrians who might hear this message, she began, "This is Anna Chen, speaking for all of humanity. We know we made mistakes. We fought when we should have listened, and we destroyed when we should have understood. We're sorry for what happened to your people, and we want to make it right." The beacon hummed to life behind her, its crystalline surface beginning to glow with the same blue light that had once heralded destruction but now carried hope across the void. Earth offers you sanctuary. Not as subjects or servants, but as friends and equals. We have learned from your technology, and we hope you can learn from our mistakes. Together, maybe we can build the kind of civilization that truly deserves that name. The message concluded with detailed star charts showing safe passage routes to Earth, along with technical specifications for the quantum beacons that would guide refugee ships safely through human space. The message had gone on to offer something that no young species had ever been granted: full membership in the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. But the most important part had come at the end. We believe you have finally answered the question that has plagued civilized species for millions of years, the question of what true civilization actually means. It is not the absence of conflict, but the wisdom to know what is worth fighting for and the courage to protect it. Welcome to the galaxy, defenders of choice. As Anna stood watching the beacon pulse its message of hope across the void, she reflected on the long journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had been called uncivilized by species that equated order with righteousness and submission with wisdom. Their response had been to demonstrate that sometimes the most civilized thing you could do was refuse to be civilized by someone else's definition. The war had been terrible, and the cost had been high. But from that cost had come something unprecedented: a new model for how different species could coexist without losing what made them unique. The galaxy was a richer, more diverse, and ultimately more civilized place because humanity had chosen to fight rather than surrender, and then chosen to heal rather than hate. The aliens had called them uncivilized. In the end, it was humanity that taught the galaxy what civilization truly meant: not the imposition of order from above, but the protection of freedom for all who chose to cherish it. Earth's children were among the stars now, carrying that lesson to every corner of the galaxy. And in the quantum frequencies that connected all civilized worlds, Anna Chen's childhood voice still echoed, reminding the cosmos that sometimes the smallest person could speak the loudest truth. Real civilization isn't about never fighting. It's about knowing what's worth fighting for. The message had gone on to offer something that no young species had ever been granted: full membership in the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. But the most important part had come at the end. We believe you have finally answered the question that has plagued civilized species for millions of years, the question of what true civilization actually means. It is not the absence of conflict, but the wisdom to know what is worth fighting for and the courage to protect it. Welcome to the galaxy, defenders of choice. As Anna stood watching the beacon pulse its message of hope across the void, she reflected on the long journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had been called uncivilized by species that equated order with righteousness and submission with wisdom. Their response had been to demonstrate that sometimes the most civilized thing you could do was refuse to be civilized by someone else's definition. The war had been terrible, and the cost had been high. But from that cost had come something unprecedented, a new model for how different species could coexist without losing what made them unique. The galaxy was a richer, more diverse, and ultimately more civilized place because humanity had chosen to fight rather than surrender, and then chosen to heal rather than hate. The aliens had called them uncivilized. In the end, it was humanity that taught the galaxy what civilization truly meant, not the imposition of order from above, but the protection of freedom for all who chose to cherish it. Earth's children were among the stars now, carrying that lesson to every corner of the galaxy. And in the quantum frequencies that connected all civilized worlds, Anna Chen's childhood voice still echoed, reminding the cosmos that sometimes the smallest person could speak the loudest truth. Real civilization isn't about never fighting. It's about knowing what's worth fighting for. 50 years had passed since the Zephyrian invasion, and Anna Chen Martinez stood in the same rebuilt Tokyo Bay, though now as Earth's Elder Coordinator Emeritus. Her hair was silver, her face lined with decades of difficult decisions, but her eyes still held the same unwavering determination that had once defied an alien fleet. Beside her stood her granddaughter, Elena Chen Reeves Kim, named for both the scientist who had saved humanity and the astronaut who had sacrificed everything for it. At 25, Elena possessed her grandmother's diplomatic gifts and her great-grandmother's scientific brilliance, serving as the youngest director of interstellar relations in the Alliance's history. Status report on the Andromeda situation? Anna asked, though she already knew it would be complicated. It always was when dealing with species that measured time in geological epochs. The Eternal Council has formally requested our intervention, Elena replied, her voice carrying the same clear tone that had become something of a family trademark. 3 of their member species are on the verge of civil war. Standard diplomatic protocols have failed. Anna nodded grimly. This was the call they had been expecting for years. The Terran Alliance had built a reputation as mediators and peacekeepers, but they had never been tested on the scale of an entire galactic civilization tearing itself apart. What's the Council offering in return for our help? Full access to the archive worlds, Elena said, and Anna's eyebrows rose. The archive worlds were legendary even among the elder races, planets converted into vast libraries containing the accumulated knowledge of every civilization that had ever existed in the galaxy. No young species had ever been granted access to them. They're serious, then. How many ships do we have available? The entire Third Fleet is ready for deployment. 50 vessels, mixed human-Zephyrian crews, full diplomatic and peacekeeping equipment. Elena paused. Admiral Park Thompson wants to take the Fourth Fleet as backup, but that would leave the outer colonies with minimal protection. Anna considered this. Admiral Maria Park Thompson was the daughter of Dr. Park and the granddaughter of a British naval officer who had survived the London bombardment. She was also the first human to graduate from the Zephyrian Strategic Academy, making her one of the most capable fleet commanders in known space. Send word to the Admiral. She can take half the Fourth Fleet, but I want the new experimental ships kept in reserve. If this goes badly, we'll need them for the second wave. The experimental ships were humanity's latest achievement, vessels that pushed the boundaries of both human and Zephyrian technology. They were fast enough to cross the galaxy in weeks rather than months, armed with weapons that could disable entire fleets without causing permanent damage, and equipped with diplomatic suites capable of facilitating communication between species that had evolved on opposite sides of the galaxy. More importantly, they were crewed by the new generation humans and Zephyrians who had grown up together, thought of each other as siblings rather than allies, and approached problems with a hybrid perspective that neither species could have developed alone. The crisis in Andromeda had been brewing for centuries. Three ancient species, the crystalline Thoughtweavers, the energy-based flux dancers, and the machine hybrid core builders, had fundamental disagreements about the nature of consciousness and reality. What had started as philosophical debates had escalated into actual warfare when the core builders had begun converting entire star systems into computational matrices, claiming that biological consciousness was inherently flawed and needed to be corrected. The flux dancers, who existed as pure energy and saw consciousness as a flowing, ever-changing dance between states of being, viewed this as an abomination. The Thoughtweavers, who experienced reality as crystalline geometric patterns and believed that consciousness should be preserved in perfect, unchanging forms, saw both other species as dangerously chaotic. Each species was convinced that their approach to existence was not just superior, but the only one that could ensure the survival of consciousness in the universe. Each had the technology to impose their vision on the others. And each was preparing to do exactly that. The irony isn't lost on me, Anna said as she reviewed the briefing materials. Three species that have existed for millions of years, and they're making the same mistake the Zephyrians made with us, assuming that different means wrong. The responses came within hours. The core builders wanted to study the Alliance's information processing systems. The flux dancers were fascinated by the concept of biological consciousness working in harmony with artificial intelligence. The Thoughtweavers were intrigued by the geometric patterns created when multiple species collaborated on complex problems. "They're coming," Elena reported. "All three factions are sending observation teams." "Good," Anna said. "Now comes the hard part, being ourselves while three ancient species watch our every move and judge whether we're worth imitating." The next 3 months turned the Terran Alliance fleet into something unprecedented, a living laboratory where three of the galaxy's oldest species could observe how a young, hybrid civilization actually functioned. The core builders sent a delegation of machine hybrid entities who were fascinated by the Alliance's quantum biological computers, systems that used both electronic processing and biological neural networks to solve problems that neither could handle alone. They spent weeks studying how human intuition and Zephyrian pattern recognition worked together with artificial intelligence to create solutions that none of the three elements could have reached independently. Inefficient was their initial assessment. Biological components introduce random variables that reduce computational accuracy. But as they observed longer, they began to notice something else. The random variables, the unpredictable leaps of human intuition, the aesthetic preferences of Zephyrian consciousness, the ethical constraints that both species imposed on their artificial systems didn't reduce the quality of solutions. They increased it. "Your hybrid systems solve problems we did not know existed," admitted Corinity Prime during one of the daily briefings. "Our computational matrices are more efficient, but your biological chaos identifies questions we never thought to ask." The flux dancers were initially overwhelmed by the constant change and adaptation they observed in Alliance society. Their own consciousness flowed like energy through space, changing form but maintaining continuity. The Alliance, by contrast, seemed to thrive on discontinuity, human individuals making decisions that contradicted their own previous choices, Zephyrian collectives splitting and reforming around new ideas, artificial intelligences evolving in ways their programmers had never intended. "How do you maintain identity coherence when your consciousness patterns shift so rapidly?" asked flow dancer Velti HYSS during a cultural exchange session. Elena, who had been designated as the primary liaison, smiled. "We don't maintain identity. We choose it, every day. My grandmother was a diplomat who ended a war by refusing to surrender. I'm a scientist who prevents wars by helping people understand each other. We're the same person in some ways, different in others, and we're both constantly changing into someone new." The Thoughtweavers were perhaps the most challenged by what they observed. Their consciousness existed as perfect crystalline structures, preserving thoughts and memories in unchanging geometric forms. The Alliance's approach to consciousness, fluid, adaptive, sometimes contradictory, seemed like chaos to minds that prized eternal order. But they were also the first to grasp the deeper implications of what they were seeing. "Your chaos patterns create stability emergent," observed Thoughtweaver Prime Angle during a joint analysis session. Individual unpredictability generates collective resilience. Our crystal consciousness preserves perfection but cannot adapt. Your fluid consciousness sacrifices perfection but can survive any change. It was exactly the kind of insight that Anna had been hoping for. The breakthrough came during the 4th month, when a genuine crisis arose within the Alliance fleet itself. A group of human colonists from the outer systems had developed a new form of consciousness enhancement technology that could allow biological minds to process information at near-artificial speeds. A faction of Zephyrians argued that this represented dangerous acceleration of natural evolution. A group of artificial intelligences calculated that the technology could disrupt the careful balance that allowed hybrid crews to function effectively. The 3 Alliance communities were locked in their own version of the conflict that was tearing apart Andromeda. "Perfect," Anna said when Elena brought her the news. "Now our guests can see how we handle this kind of problem." What followed was a masterclass in conflict resolution that none of the observing species had ever seen before. Instead of each faction trying to impose their view on the others, the Alliance communities began a process called perspective integration. Human representatives explained their drive for individual enhancement and self-improvement. Zephyrian speakers shared their concerns about disrupting the natural harmony that had evolved between their species. The artificial intelligences presented their calculations about systemic stability and long-term consequences. But then something unprecedented happened. Instead of debating which perspective was correct, the 3 communities began exploring how all 3 perspectives could be honored simultaneously. The solution they developed was elegant in its complexity. The consciousness enhancement technology would be implemented gradually, with extensive monitoring to ensure it didn't disrupt existing partnerships. Zephyrian bioharmony techniques would be integrated to ensure the enhancements felt natural rather than alien. The artificial intelligences would continuously model the long-term effects, allowing for adjustments as the technology evolved. Most importantly, participation would be entirely voluntary, with multiple paths available for individuals who wanted different levels of enhancement or none at all. "You solve problems by making them bigger," observed Corinity Prime with something that might have been admiration. "Instead of choosing one solution, you create systems that can support many solutions simultaneously." "Chaos within order," agreed Flow Dancer Vel THYSS. "Change constant that creates stability dynamic." "Multiple truth preservation," added Thoughtweaver Prime Angle. "Each perspective crystal maintains clarity while contributing to pattern larger." Anna smiled. After 4 months of observation, the 3 ancient species were finally beginning to understand what the Alliance had learned from its encounter with the Zephyrians. Diversity wasn't a problem to be solved, but a resource to be cultivated. The formal peace negotiations began 6 months after the observation period ended. But these weren't the kind of negotiations that had been attempted before, sessions where each faction tried to convince the others to adopt their worldview. Instead, they were collaborative workshops where 3 radically different forms of consciousness worked together to design a framework that could honor all 3 approaches to existence. The core builders agreed to halt their forced conversion programs in exchange for voluntary participation opportunities. Any biological consciousness that wanted to explore machine hybrid existence would be welcomed, but no one would be compelled to change. The Flux Dancers established flow zones where consciousness could exist in pure energy forms, but they also recognized the validity of fixed pattern consciousness and agreed to stop trying to forcibly liberate crystalline or biological minds. The Thoughtweavers created preservation matrices where perfect geometric consciousness could exist eternally, but they also acknowledged that some forms of consciousness thrived on change and imperfection. Most importantly, all 3 species agreed to establish mixed communities where representatives of all 3 forms of consciousness could collaborate on problems that required multiple perspectives. "It's not perfect," Elena observed as she watched the first mixed Andromedan community being established. "There are still philosophical disagreements, still moments of cultural friction." "Perfect would be boring," Anna replied. "And more importantly, it would be fragile. This framework they've built can adapt because it was designed to handle contradiction and conflict constructively." The success of the Andromeda Accord sent ripples throughout the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, ancient species that had been locked in seemingly irreconcilable conflicts had found a way to coexist without either surrender or conquest. The Eternal Council, which had ruled Andromeda for millions of years through a philosophy of enforced harmony, found itself replaced by something new, the Adaptive Collective, a governing structure that thrived on managed diversity rather than imposed unity. But the most significant change was in how the galaxy's elder species viewed the young Terran Alliance. No longer were humans and their partners seen as promising but immature newcomers. They were recognized as the architects of a new paradigm for galactic civilization. 100 years after the Zephyrian invasion, Anna Chen's great-great-granddaughter stood in a very different Tokyo Bay. The original redemption beacon still pulsed its message across the cosmos, but it was now joined by thousands of similar beacons throughout the galaxy, each one broadcasting the same fundamental message: difference is not dangerous. Diversity is strength. All consciousness is welcome. Dr. Sarah Chun-Reeves Kimengai represented the seventh generation of her family to serve in interstellar diplomacy, but she was also something new, the first human to be born in the Andromeda Galaxy, raised in a community where core builder computational consciousness, flux dancer energy patterns, and thought weaver crystalline geometry were as normal as human emotions or Zephyrian harmonics. The problem she faced would have been unimaginable to her ancestors. The galaxy had become so successful at integrating different forms of consciousness that it was running out of new perspectives to include. The transcendence warning came in this morning, her aide informed her. The aide was a hybrid entity that combined human creativity, Zephyrian pattern recognition, core builder processing power, flux dancer adaptability, and thought weaver preservation protocols into something that was simultaneously all and none of these things. Sarah nodded grimly. The transcendence warning had been predicted for decades. When a civilization became too successful at integrating different forms of consciousness, it risked achieving a kind of perfect synthesis that would eliminate the creative tension that drove progress and growth. In other words, by becoming too good at including everyone, they were in danger of becoming stagnant. Recommendations from the Advisory Collective? 3 proposals. The expansion faction wants to see new galaxies with isolated colonies that will develop different perspectives through separation. The innovation faction wants to artificially create new forms of consciousness to maintain diversity. The stability faction wants to accept transcendence as the natural end state of consciousness evolution. Sarah considered this while looking out at the bay where her ancestor had once defied alien invaders. The irony was remarkable. Humanity had been called uncivilized for fighting, had proven their worth by learning to cooperate, and now faced the possibility that they had become too civilized for their own good. What would Anna Chen do, she asked herself, using the question that had guided 7 generations of her family through impossible decisions. The answer came to her with the clarity that seemed to run in the Chen bloodline. Anna wouldn't try to solve the problem. She would reframe it. Cancel my appointments, Sarah told her aide. I'm calling an emergency session of the Galactic Council. And send a message to every beacon in the galaxy. We're about to make history again. The message that went out from Tokyo Bay to every corner of the known universe was brief and carried the same defiant simplicity that had once challenged alien conquerors. To all consciousness, everywhere, we have learned to live together. Now we need to learn something harder: how to grow apart without growing apart. The galaxy is getting crowded with agreement. It's time to make room for beautiful disagreement again. The response was immediate and exactly what Sarah had hoped for: chaos. Some species wanted to maintain the current harmony. Others demanded the right to develop in isolation. Still others proposed radical experiments in consciousness that would push the boundaries of what intelligence could become. The careful consensus that had held the galaxy together for a century began to fracture into thousands of different approaches to existence. And for the first time in decades, the galaxy began to grow again. Sarah Chun-Reeves Kimengai smiled as she watched the reports of philosophical conflicts, ideological disputes, and creative disagreements flowing in from across the cosmos. Her ancestor had once told alien bullies that fighting was what kept humanity alive. A century later, her descendant was telling the galaxy that a little chaos might be exactly what a perfectly ordered civilization needed. The aliens had called humanity uncivilized. Humanity had responded by becoming the most civilized species in the galaxy. Now, perhaps, it was time to remember that the most civilized thing of all might be knowing when to be a little uncivilized again. In the quantum frequencies that connected all consciousness across space and time, Anna Chen's voice seemed to whisper approval. Real civilization isn't about achieving perfect order. It's about maintaining the courage to choose chaos when order becomes a cage. The galaxy was about to become a very interesting place again.